Good morning. We are running a little bit late, so I'm going to start. And if you miss a little of my talk because you're not here yet, too bad for me. I'm Bob Kuttner, co-editor of the American Prospect, and thank you. And I am going to be chairing and also giving a few minutes of opening remarks, and I will introduce the rest of the panel shortly. And I'm also the timekeeper. You will have a chance to ask questions. The system is that you write questions on cards. Ragini over there of the Campaign for America's Future staff will hold up cards, and if you want a card, please hold up your hand. In the current issue of the American Prospect, which is in your packet, there is a piece that I wrote called The Death and Life of American Liberalism, and I was looking for a good epigraph, a quote to set off the piece, as writers are sometimes wont to do, and I thought of the line from John Lovitz in the 1988 Saturday Night Live skit, in which Lovitz is playing Michael Dukakis, and George Bush I has just made a blithering fool of himself, and Lovitz, as Dukakis, shakes his head and says, "I can't believe I'm losing to this guy." And the question is, why are we losing to these guys? After all, on issue by issue, after issue after issue, the American public does not support what the Bush administration is doing to the country. And the answer is very simple. They believe passionately in what they're doing. They don't equivocate. They lie, but they don't equivocate. There's a difference. They don't use pollsters to divine what they're supposed to be for. They use pollsters to figure out how to propagandize it and market it to the public. They know what they believe. So the American public is not on their side, but they do politics dirtier, and they do politics more effectively. The heart and soul of what progressives and Democrats stand for when they win is about opportunity and security for ordinary people. When that message gets muddied, social issues, foreign policy issues crowd out pocketbook issues, Democrats sound muddled, and Republicans win. I could sit down right after that, but they've given me 15 minutes, so I'm going to spell this out in a little more detail. What has George Bush done to this country? First of all, he's given us tax cuts that benefit a very, very narrow elite of Republican core supporters and starve the country of resources that help ordinary people. The deficits that result from those tax cuts, in turn, make social investment seem fiscally impossible and politically impossible. That not only guts services that people actually value, but it stunts the liberal imagination and leads half of the Democratic Party to blather about fiscal responsibility and budget balance, which only confuses the message even further. President Bush has presided over a period of uniquely weak job creation, over the erosion in the quantity and the quality and the security of jobs. Our friends at the American Policy Institute can provide you with all the chapter and verse. The Bush administration has left us in dire straits internationally, and Clyde Prestowitz is going to tell you some of the detail about that. But basically, it has bequeathed a kind of codependency in which unsustainably large deficits, both budget deficits and trade deficits, have left us dependent on foreign creditors. With one hand, the Republican right is trumpeting, I guess that's a terrible mixed metaphor, with one hand, the Republican right is pointing. Editors are supposed to avoid mixed metaphors and cliches like the plague. With one hand, before I get into any more trouble, the Republican right is pointing to the national security menace of China. With the other hand, they're taking in literally trillions of dollars to fund the twin deficits. In this codependency, China provides us with the money to fund our debt and provides us with products manufactured at starvation wages, which displace our workers. You could say this codependency cannot go on forever, but it could go on for a long time. It's also, the Bush administration created terrible economic stress on working families. And you have to ask the question, what then is keeping the economy afloat? Why are corporate profits high, and why are corporate profits holding up the stock market? Well, the answer, in a funny way, is a perverse kind of Keynesianism. President Bush doesn't mind big deficits. And Alan Greenspan, for the most part, as a good right-wing Republican, in his heart of hearts, is willing to accommodate those deficits. And so even though if you were going to have deficits of 4 or 5% of GDP, which is what we have, it would be much sounder economics and much better social policy to spend that money on things like child care and health coverage and infrastructure renewal and the Apollo project and stem cell research, rather than on tax cuts for the rich. But as World War II proved, even deficits that don't create much productive wealth, after all, in World War II, half of what we produced with all of that deficit funding was blown up, even the wrong kind of deficit produces a lot of economic stimulus. And so this debt that will haunt our children 20 or 30 years from now has kept the economy afloat during the George Bush regime. Corporate profits also, of course, reflect the weakening of worker bargaining power. So some of the corporate profits that keep the economy from sinking are the result of these deficits, and some reflect money that otherwise should have gone to workers. Now, this can go on for a while, and it's not enough just to wait for some kind of economic collapse. We need a compelling story. We need a vivid set of proposals that can make a difference in the lives of ordinary people. Democrats, for the most part, have not done an adequate job in offering those. Small, bore, technical, incremental ideas, and I use bore in both senses of the word, don't move voters. So the job of leadership and the job of grassroots organizing is to help people make connections. People feel economically shortchanged in their own lives, but issues that should be politicized have been depoliticized. Why can't I afford a home without spending 40% of my income and taking a very risky adjustable rate mortgage? Why don't I have reliable health insurance? Why have good industrial jobs been replaced with bad, unreliable service sector jobs? Why do many people not fill prescriptions after September because their HMO drug benefit has expired? Why is gasoline so expensive? Why is there no reliable, affordable child care? For the most part, even though people experience this very profoundly, the fact that every one of these issues reflects wrong-headed, disastrous Republican policies has not sunk in to the minds of enough people. And meanwhile, issues that should not be politicized are the stuff of politics. Should government promote religious faith? Who can I marry? What about my sexuality? This is the stuff that crowds out things that ought to be the stuff of politics. Arlie Hochschild has an article forthcoming in the American Prospect, and she writes that for people who are downwardly mobile economically, the promise of the rapture offers a celestial upward mobility, and that the idea of the end of days in which the faithful will be rewarded and saved, and others, like us, will be consigned to eternal damnation, creates a new eternal definition of haves and have-nots. That's the kind of politics that is crowding out the politics of pocketbook in which our side wins. Well, as John F. Kennedy said, here on earth, God's work must surely be our own. So what is our work? Our work is to repoliticize pocketbook issues in a way that resonates with the lived life of ordinary people. You could run an entire election on the theme of the screwing of young people. A 30 or 35-year-old, and I compare this with my own generation, dealing with college loans that reflect astronomically high college tuitions, looking to start a family, looking to buy a home, wondering why the job doesn't provide health insurance, ought to be drawing political conclusions that the government is not on his or her side, not because the government is inherently bad, but because the wrong people are running the government. And it's our job to tell that story compellingly. If we do so, a new progressive generation will become politicized as our field troops, and we will win. And Democrats have discovered the joy of unity on the issue of Social Security, which is wonderful. But in many respects, that's a defensive fight that's living off of the political capital of our grandparents' generation at a time when progressives really were on the march. That's why the Bush administration is so determined to kill Social Security as we know it. If you think about Social Security, it is our most expensive, our most redistributive, and if we dare say it, our most socialistic program. And you know what? People love it. And they would love universal health insurance if we could just get politicians to stand up and advocate. So, in a parallel universe somewhere, grown-ups are dealing with the real issues that challenge America. And it's our job to bring that home. We need an Apollo program of investment in technology to keep good jobs in America. We need universal health insurance. We need a rollback of tax cuts for the rich to pay for this stuff. We need worker rights. We need affordable child care. And a few big resident issues that would help the average working person would bring our party and our movement back into majority. I will close with two very short anecdotes. You heard about the Florida minimum wage victory last night. What you didn't hear was that John Kerry didn't endorse it. It won 1.5 million votes more than John Kerry did. If John Kerry had gotten out there with Acorn and stood for the minimum wage hike, he would be president today. Bernie Sanders, who is going to be the next senator from Vermont, won 43 of the 44 Vermont precincts that George W. Bush carried. Think about that. If you stand for working people and are their champion, they don't mind that you have avant-garde views on things like gay rights and abortion. So I'm delighted that you're here. I'm delighted that Bob and Roger and the rest of the CAF group have built a bigger and better conference like this every year, and I'm honored to be among you. Thank you. Now then, it is my pleasure to introduce three great friends and collaborators and co-conspirators, beginning with Mary Beth Maxwell, who is the Executive Director of American Rights at Work, former National Field Director for Jobs with Justice, and before that, Deputy Field Director of NARAL, and boy, do we need great organizers. And I just messed up, because I'm not as good an organizer as she is, and the sequence is actually Beth Schulman next, and then Mary Beth Maxwell. And Beth is the author of Betrayal of Work, How Low-Wage Jobs Fail 30 Million Americans, and she's a former longtime activist with United Food and Commercial Workers. I apologize.